Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 film Skeletons in the Closet. It's a Shudder exclusive, and it's coming to Shudder on Friday, February 9th. Now, I'm going to start this off by saying every film is worth watching at least once, just at least to figure out how you personally feel about it. Because I give my opinion doesn't mean it's going to be your opinion, obviously, but I like to give my opinion because there have been people who watch this channel who feel like our tastes line up pretty well, but there are a lot who watch the channel and think, if Carlin doesn't like it, then I'm probably going to like it. So, just know that this is a film that did not hit for me. I did not love this film. I'm giving it a pretty low rating, and I'll obviously give the reasons why in a no spoiler capacity, since this is a newer film, and when I'm putting this review out, it's not even on Shudder yet. But that doesn't mean that people won't enjoy it. There will definitely be some people who enjoy it, and even when I talk negatively about films, I do like to give the positives, but I also like to every now and then kind of remind people that there are people who worked hard on these things. Even though the film didn't come out the greatest, doesn't mean that there weren't people who put a lot of work into it and time and care, and who deserve to be, applauded for that. But anyway, this film was directed by Asif Akbar, who also did The Commando, Morbid Stories, and Clown Motel, which coincidentally, I had just seen someone talking about the film Clown Motel very recently on social media, and I was kind of like, looks like something maybe I want to check out. I don't know, maybe I do. I think it's Tobin Bell in it, so that's, a seller. Written by Al Bravo, who wrote The Wailer, Reality Terror Night, and The Commando, as well as Joshua A. Cohen, who wrote Red Herring, Star Effer, I can't finish it, and Black Warrant. And Terrence Howard, yes, the actor Terrence Howard, was also involved in writing it. He was also involved as being an executive producer and is one of the stars of the film. He's a main character. So it has Terrence Howard, but it also has Cuba Gooding Jr., and it also has Udo Kier. So if that cast sounds interesting to you, maybe you want to check the film out for that reason. I will comment on some of the performances in a little bit, but synopsis of the story. It's basically about a family who are going through a very hard time. The daughter has some medical issues, and the father is out of work at this point, and they have bills, they have medical bills, and things aren't looking great. People aren't feeling great in the family, so in many ways. And the wife ends up having these kind of terrible nightmares, these visions during the day of a spectral something that is scary. And it's a horror film. There's something going on. I don't want to elaborate past that, but just kind of give you the basis for where everything starts. Alright, so the beginning of the film is okay, but does give you a feeling that this may be a pretty generic story. I wouldn't say as a whole, though, it ended up being a totally generic story. There is an okay premise here. It's just a lot of the way that it was executed really just didn't come together in the best way possible, or even that decent of a way, unfortunately, for me. But I mean, I understand what they were going for, and honestly, I really like their kind of different take on the term skeleton in the closet. I thought that there is an actual explanation about that in the film, and I thought that was kind of cool and interesting and a good kind of basis for something, but it's just, the script really is not there, and there are a lot of other things that just aren't there either, but I'll obviously comment on that as I go. It does become very clear in this film that, and early in this film, that Terrence Howard is actually phoning it in. Or his acting's just not very good anymore. It's one of those things. Either he was phoning in this performance, or his acting's not all that great. I have a hard time believing that his acting's not there. It seemed like he didn't really care that much. The way he delivers lines in this film, very disinterested. They're all the same. His emotions, he has a hard time showing. He is just not great in this film, and he actually drags the film down quite a bit, in my opinion, personally, which is really unfortunate, because you can tell there are some other people who are really trying, like Cuba Gooding Jr., who I think did what he could with the role he had. It seemed like he was bringing it. He was like, this is my job, I'm going to do this. And when you're acting in a scene with someone who's not trying that hard, or doesn't seem like they're trying that hard, it's tough to sell it. So I feel bad for people who really did the best they could in this, especially in scenes with Terrence Howard. So kind of disappointing on that one. Overall, the acting, though, is serviceable. And I just say serviceable because it ranges from pretty good to Terrence Howard, unfortunately. So it's a mix, unfortunately. But, you know, that's what you get with more independent films, and this definitely looks and feels a lot like a more independent film. And there are a lot of other things in the film that really kind of point to it being pretty low-budget independent. About 17 minutes in, something happens that I really did not see coming, but I really quite liked. And it's actually something that I really wish they would have incorporated even more into the film. It's in there again. Like, it's something very kind of like out of left field-ish, but I was very intrigued by it, and I thought the way they did it was cool. And it does end up coming back, but then it's just not used enough, in my opinion. They should have made it kind of more of a focal point in the film, because it is a cool, interesting concept. I just think that, you know, when they were coming up with the idea and kind of writing out this story, they just didn't stick to what was the most interesting stuff. They kind of ended up with a lot of ho-hum type stuff in the film itself. There are a lot of cliche story elements to the script that just make things boring, unfortunately, including, not really giving anything away, but what the main character tries to do as far as trying to figure out his financial situation for his family. That very cliche. There's just a lot of cliche stuff that ends up coming up in the film. One of the things that is not cliche, though, is I thought the dialogue was actually pretty well written, especially for how I didn't feel like the story was overall well written. So it's this interesting thing where, like, the script isn't great, but the dialogue was written in a pretty believable, realistic way. So when people were actually interacting, you were like, yeah, this sounds like how people would talk. So, and I know that's hard. It literally, like, I've written some scripts before, and it's literally not easy to make it sound right and to make each person sound like they have their own individual voice. So yeah. But going back to the writing, the characters are very one-dimensional. There is not a lot of depth to any of these characters, really, and that's very unfortunate. They had the time to kind of make these characters more complex and flesh things out with them and make you care about them a little bit more, but they spent that time doing other things that are just very repetitive with the story. It feels like characters have the same conversations multiple times. That's one of the repetitive things I was talking about. There are literally moments where characters are having conversations again, and you're just like, didn't they just have a conversation about this same thing, and it's going basically the same way? And that's what I mean about they had the time to do other stuff, more interesting things, but they chose to just rehash stuff. And that's one of the things that points back to the bad writing. I will say that the Udo Kier scenes by far are the most entertaining. If you're familiar with Udo Kier and if you like him as an actor like I do, he chews scenery. And he brought it. It was obvious he was having a good time. Well, I mean, it appears like he was having a good time. And it just seeps into every scene that he's in, and he is a joy in this film. So if you are going to watch this film, just know that the Udo Kier scenes are going to be a good time. Love it when he was on screen. They do try to throw in some scares, but unfortunately they all kind of end up feeling very much the same, which actually just ends up getting super annoying. You know, it's this stuff that's like, oh, scary thing, with like cranking up the score for it, which the score was fine, but the cranking it up was over the top. But they keep doing those types of moments, but they all look about the same. They're all set up about the same. So it's like, you got to do something different. You can't just keep hitting people with the same stuff. So going back to the repetition thing again. The camera work is solid in this, and there are some interestingly lit scenes, in my opinion. So when it comes to the lighting aspect of it, well done. There is some good basic technical stuff that's going on here. Like, the directing's not bad. The cinematography's not bad. The camera work, you know, some interesting movements and everything. I really did enjoy the lighting from time to time. There were some really inspired scenes with some cool lighting choices, so I like that about it. What I didn't like, though, is the CGI doesn't look great. One of the things is this: if you know you don't have a huge budget, if you know your limitations, and you should know your limitations when it comes to CGI, if it's going to look that kind of wonky, it's not going to look that great, Don't put it in broad daylight because it's going to look even worse. And that's what happens in this film. All the CGI is like in broad daylight. So it looks even worse than it otherwise would have. And don't do it much. And they went harder on the CGI that doesn't look great than they really should have with this film, in my opinion. One of those days. The movie is definitely at its most interesting at the end. It does kind of ramp up at the very end, probably like the last 15 minutes or so. And I found myself being even more engaged in it. Like, that was literally some of the most engaging, interesting stuff of the film. The problem is they had a really hard time getting us from the beginning to the end. There's just a lot of stuff in the middle that feels like it doesn't really matter at all, and we could have gotten something way more interesting and entertaining to kind of flesh out a story that we would care about. And for that reason, I'm also going to say the pacing is pretty bad for this film. Feels like it very slowly goes about and meanders all over the place until it's kind of like, oh yeah, it's time to end this film. Now let's do that. And that's when the most fun is happening, other than the Udo Kier scenes. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Skeletons in the Closet. I would be very much interested in hearing from other people, especially if you liked the film. Go ahead and put it down in the comments. I'm giving it out of 5 stars a 1.5 star rating. Not a fan of this one at all. Thought about giving it 2 stars, but I just don't think it's there. 1.5 stars, unfortunately. But again, comments, we can talk about this film. And give me a thumbs up on this video if you want to help me with the YouTube algorithm. Hit subscribe to my channel if you appreciate any of my videos, including this one. And go ahead and hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos. But regardless, I thank you very much for taking your time to watch this, especially if you made it to this point of the video where I'm kind of doing all the stuff that people don't like to watch. But thank you, and until next time, keep it brutal.